On. So good afternoon, good morning, everybody. This is Kaustubh Jagtap, or KJ. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at SafeReach. I wanted to thank every one of you for taking the time to attend our live interactive session today. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar is indeed being recorded, and the recording will be available on our website, as well as will be shared with all the attendees and registrants after the event is over. At any given point of time, if you feel you have questions about our product or the content that was discussed today, please use the Q&A function in Zoom webinar to share your questions. We will be promptly answering your questions right after during the Q&A session. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. As many of you are aware, the MITRE ATT&CK framework lays a very solid foundation for security teams to speak a common same language that they can communicate with each other. And it helps them have a shared understanding of how threat actors operate in the wild. Today's interactive webinar will highlight how the SafeReach platform can operationalize the MITRE ATT&CK framework for your benefit, allowing enterprise security teams to quickly visualize their posture, focus on areas that are the most pertinent, that are in most need of remediation, and quickly bring security and infrastructure teams together to update and validate security controls and more effectively harden your organizational defenses. Our speaker today is SafeReach's Security Services Director, Derek Ryan. He's a veteran security architect with over 20 years of information security experience. Derek currently leads the development of various value-added services for our customers and the broader security community. Over to you, Derek.
Thank you. So to start, what is MITRE ATT&CK? Right, and MITRE ATT&CK is a catalog or a knowledge base of adversaries' behaviors. It's broken down into tactics, techniques, and procedures. Tactics are the why or the tactical objective. Techniques are the how the adversary achieves that objective and often what they gain from that objective. Procedures represent a threat group, a specific threat group's use of a technique. In addition, there's guidance for detection and mitigation. There's data sources, threat groups, software, and in the latest version, version 12 of ATT&CK, they added a new capability called campaigns. Outside of MITRE ATT&CK, MITRE also provides analytics through CAR, Cyber Analytics Repository, and if you look up MITRE CAR, you'll be able to pull up those analytics to help with the detection side of the house. Operationalizing MITRE ATT&CK really starts with detections. Behavior is quite simply the battleground, post-exploitation behavior. And not all behaviors are malicious in and of themselves, and that's why they fly under the radar often. It's the correlation of behaviors and detections themselves to help find that malicious intent is what we're looking for. So you don't necessarily want to alert on everything. You want to have a small cluster or even a larger cluster of behavior to create that alert using behavior analytics, using various capabilities within your SIM, etc. Right? And the real goal here is not only to detect an attack early in the kill chain, but also be able to detect attacks across the entire kill chain. And what that amounts to is a methodology of research, right? Is using threat intel, vendor threat intel, ISAC threat intel, industry-based threat intel, and your own organizational threat intel, as well as MITRE ATT&CK and other sources to really start to prioritize the behaviors that you want to detect, the things that are most prevalent in the attack space or with the threat modeling that you've done for your organization. You can start with 10 or 15, prioritize based on that various threat intel and the ability to emulate that behavior. Right? If you can't emulate the behavior, you might want to hold off on that one until you have that ability. From there, you want to be able to emulate that behavior and analyze your telemetry. Do you have the right telemetry? Are you seeing the right things? Right? Are you capable of building detections based on the collection of data that you have? From there, we go into creating that detection, running that adversary or emulating that behavior, being able to validate that detection and adjust it. And this is a complete cycle. We're going to dig a little deeper in that here in just a second, right? Basically, detection engineering is an emerging discipline. It's relatively new. There are some pioneers in the field. There's a lot of data available on it, but it's something that is going to require some testing and vetting, right? It's a development life cycle. It's something you want to not only create the detections, but maintain them. And threat intelligence is a huge feed into that. With detection engineering, you can build it. It takes a lot of resources to build it, especially for 24/7 by 365 coverage. You can buy it in the case of a managed detection response capability. And you want an MDR that is covering not only endpoint, but network, cloud, identity and access management, your data centers, your entire environment, right? So if you look to buy it, you might want to make sure you have solid coverage across the board. Hybrid is the model where you buy an MDR, but you also may have a couple incident responders. You may have a small blue team that is integrated in the process as well. They're going to be the ones vetting any alerts that may pop up and digging in deeper, and then going into full response mode should there be a problem. Breaking down the development lifecycle a little more, and this is Snowflake's development lifecycle, there's two areas where BAS plays a key role. One of which is the requirements gathering. Not only is it the threat modeling, threat intelligence, but you can actually use adversary emulation in your requirements gathering. And the other is the continuous testing of your detections. So you can monitor those detections, continue to look for those gaps, make sure your assumptions are being met and the detections are working as expected. We're going to use an example for LSAS memory and how we create detections. So you start with the analysis and that requirements gathering. And why LSAS memory, right? Well, dumping credentials from the local security authority subsystem, LSAS, is a common technique utilized by adversaries for privilege escalation and lateral movement. LSAS contains encrypted passwords, legacy password hashes, and Kerberos tickets, right? How do adversaries abuse it? Well, they use native processes, which we're going to demonstrate here in a minute, as well as custom tools such as Mimikatz, Cobalt Strike, PW Dump, to name a few. From a visibility and telemetry perspective, you can use the collection of data and that telemetry to understand what normal looks like. And once you understand normal, you want to start building your detections around abnormal behavior. From there, you want to test those detections and continue down the path. And again, this is a cycle. So from a collection standpoint, using LSAS memory as the example, you can use the access control list auditing. Sysmon is an open source tool that pulls in Windows events and actually puts it into a Windows log. And it gives you a deeper level of data than some of the standard Windows event logging. And the idea behind Sysmon is being able to pull in these various events to be able to correlate that detection and that understanding of what's happening. Sysmon is not a protected process, so you want to be careful with it. It works great, but it can be turned off. Detection logic is around what abnormal looks like. And this is just a couple of examples that Red Canary has put up around detection logic. Abnormal LSAS process access and injection, what that looks like. Some of the processes that should not be accessing the LSAS process itself, along with the handle LSAS, and being able to understand that detection logic will start to give you as you test and see, you'll get a better view of what that looks like. Another common technique that's utilized is running the run DLL32 to dump credentials with the mini dump function. And this is the one that we're actually going to show live in the platform, right? You can test manually by using this line right here in an admin level PowerShell prompt. It should go through and grab the process ID for LSAS and do a full dump to the temp folder, right? The downside to testing manually is it works great for a small number of detections, but you're likely, when you start to build out your detection engineering program and really start to operationalize MITRE ATT&CK, you can easily get into the hundreds or even 1,000 or more detections. So you're going to want to start to automate that testing per the life cycle we looked at with the Snowflake, for instance. And BAS is a very good tool for building a custom test scenario specific to testing those detections. What you can expect from the telemetry. right? Process monitoring. When we run that particular command in either an automated fashion or manually, we should see a process start. You can use the collection from EDR, Sysmon, and Windows Event Log for that command line monitoring, much like that detection logic was looking for itself. The COM services DLL loading in to run DLL 32. Again, some of the collection of telemetry for that, and then file monitoring the process dump itself, being able to see the LSAS dump in a particular folder. Bringing it all full circle. It seems like a lot when we just looked at one detection and the effort that goes into it. Where do you start? And coming back to that model we presented a little bit earlier, you can start with your own top 10 to 15 techniques. MITRE provides a list of 15 techniques with sub-techniques in a report that they put together. It ends up being just shy of 30. That report is based on data collected from attack data that's been normalized, dating from 2019 to July 2021. And across all of that attack data, they found that 15 techniques and a handful of sub-techniques that go with it covered 90% of those attacks. And that's a really good place to start. These attacks are pretty consistent. The techniques themselves are pretty broad. And when you start to dig in the sub-techniques, you start to get a lot more of detection capability there. But if you don't have your own threat intel, if you don't know your own top 10 or 15 to start with, it's a great place to start. And one of the things SafeBreach has done, we took that MITRE attack capability, we did a little more data gathering and came up with 16 techniques and the sub-techniques that cover from 2019 through 2021, and that 90% of attack data, right? We have a MITRE top 16 attack scenario, including sub-techniques, and we have a dashboard, which we're going to go through here in just a minute. Right. And the idea here is to prioritize the biggest bang for your buck. Try to get the most out of your efforts up front and then get into the details as you go. So we're going to jump into the platform here and run a PowerShell and run DLL 32 with both a system capability as well as a standard user so we can see what the differences are. And then we'll go through the data and take a look at what we should see and what we shouldn't see and what to expect and what that looks like. This won't take but a minute to run.
While that test is loading up and the results are being populated, I would, if you have any questions until now, please feel free to use the Q&A section to submit those questions. Thank you.
So jumping into the results, we'll go with the missed one first. They're both the same, but one runs a system user and one runs a standard user. This is the standard user that was run. Oh, this is the system user that was run. No, standard. And what we're looking for in the attack flow is a insufficient privileges. The LSAS memory dump is blocked. And we can look at the system logs and see how that went. And the same thing happens for the one that was stopped. And in this case, it was two different users. Same thing, we use the COM services DLL to extract the LSAS memory dump. And you can actually see the command very similar to the one that we showed for the manual testing, right? And the idea there is being able to automate this on a test by test basis in order to test your detections, your engineering, and what that looks like. From the top 16 perspective, you can take and build out an entire testing scenario and be able to go through and understand where you sit overall, the numbers of attacks and behaviors that were run in, and really start to break down where you've been. Utilizing a BAS platform really helps you take a good view of where you sit from a MITRE ATT&CK perspective. In this case, you can look at tests over time and see the differences. You can look at status by target and OS. You can look at your security controls and where you sit themselves from a platform basis, whether it was Windows or Linux, and how you're doing. Digging into the tactics and getting an idea where you sit tactic by tactic. This is the big picture view, what that looks like. Jumping into specific techniques and a breakdown of those techniques, where you missed, where you logged, where you detected, did you prevent, did you stop? And continuing down, the simulation attack type is SafeBreach's view of what we utilize from a testing methodology perspective. And then going into the TTPs, these are the 16 TTPs that cover that 90% of attacks over that 2019 to 2021 period, which is a really good starting point to build out detections and understand. And even today, command and scripting interpreter is one of the #1 techniques used by the adversary. So just starting with the big picture view and really starting to dial in your detection engineering program helps a lot. When you come in, you can take a look at the actual technique. There's a description of what it is, the number of targets, your overall view of how you did, the actual technique, and then some of the tests that were run. And the key here is the MITRE mitigation and detection guidance is built in. So when you're starting to build out your reporting, when you're starting to build out your automation, you want to look to have these kinds of capabilities in your system so that you can not only know where you're at, but start to really utilize the mitigation and detection guidance to help build out. This is MITRE level. It's pretty high level, but it's a good starting point. And as you can see, we can go technique by technique and utilize the same kind of capability. So when you really start to look at your detection engineering program and start to build out, these are the kinds of things you want to look for. You want to know where you sit in the system itself. These are clickable. You can actually pull the details of what each one is and be able to utilize that data to tighten up. From a BAS perspective, you can run each individual technique or sub-technique or actual adversary emulation. There may be several even on a sub-technique basis individually to verify your detections and to tune your detections. This gives you a really good basis to continue your detection engineering program and build it out in a way that is much simpler than, say, using a red team to do adversary emulation. It's automated, it's repeatable, and it's measurable, and allows you to speed up your processes in a way that we haven't really, if you think about from an industry perspective, been able to do in the past. BAS is a newer kind of emerging technology that really gives us that capability. So I know that was pretty quick. Wanted to provide that high-level overview, really dig into the MITRE ATT&CK and what that looks like, and give you an idea of the various kinds of capabilities that we can do to operationalize MITRE ATT&CK and what that might look like from your own perspective in building out your security program. And from there, I don't have much more. We can go to questions.
Thank you so much, Derek. So we did receive a few questions here. Let me check. How can multiple teams leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework to optimize SOC performance?
So when you look at the development lifecycle, you'll notice there's requirements gathering, there's detection engineering itself, building the detections. You can use red teams, you can use adversary emulation, you can use your threat intel teams, depending on the number of teams you have within your org, to utilize MITRE ATT&CK to build out your attack plans, to do your testing, to create your detections, and map it all to that common framework so we're all talking the same language.
You. Next question is, how often are the MITRE TTPs in the platform updated?
So MITRE generally has a major version, minor version update process. Usually it's twice a year. They'll start with a major version. In October, the version 12, major version 12 came out. They're actually up to 12.1 right now. So pretty consistently twice a year, the MITRE ATT&CK framework gets updated. The TTPs often get updated, the techniques, some of them get modified based on new threat intel. And in the case of version 12, they added a new campaigns capability within MITRE ATT&CK.
Yep. And then I think this is about our platform. How realistic are the attacks inside SafeBreach?
Well, as you can see, the command that I posted to run manually is the same command that we're actually running in our platform. So adversary emulation is very realistic from a platform perspective. The majority, if not all of the behavior that we emulate is very, very realistic from an attacker's perspective.
That's about the questions that we've received. So if anybody has any more questions, again, I just want to remind everyone to submit them via the Q&A functionality in Zoom. We'll stay online for the next 5 minutes, and if not, then we'll end the webinar. So please submit your questions using the Q&A functionality. Here's a question, and I do want to preface this that we are not, no vendor would actually be able to really answer this question in an accurate manner, but I'm just going to give Derek a chance to take a stab at it. We received a question, what percentage of coverage does SafeBreach cover against the MITRE ATT&CK?
So my understanding is we cover roughly 50% of the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. I don't have an exact number, but most of what we cover is on the enterprise matrix, right? And there's roughly between the techniques and sub-techniques around 500, and we cover about 223 of those.
Question about what about cloud services? What cloud services are covered by the SafeBreach platform?
So SafeBreach can cover natively, which means we do the API, the control plane capability, AWS and Azure currently, and we're working on GCP. But from a data plane perspective, so workloads within the cloud, we can cover any of the cloud capabilities.
Perfect. I don't see any more questions coming. So again, thank you everyone who took the time to join our live interactive session. Hope this was helpful. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to visit our website to try and get any other additional information or to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to set up a one-on-one demo for the product and all the amazing capabilities that it offers. So thank you again and have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.